Hello health champions! If you're one of the millions of people who have tried various diets to lose weight and lose belly fat but without results, or maybe you had some results but the weight and the belly fat came right back, then this video is for you. Because today I want to talk about the best diet to lose belly fat, to lose weight for good, forever. And I want to emphasize, I know you think this is sort of self-explanatory, but I want to emphasize a couple of things in this phrase. For good, that means to not gain it back. Because if you lose the weight and then you gain it back, then what was the point of it all? I know you're desperate and you just want to lose it fast, you want to lose it now, I don't care. But yes, you do care. You do not want to gain it back, all right? And the second word is diet. We want to get past the idea of a diet. So many people think, I'm going to do this for a while. I'm willing to do anything for a week, a month, 3 months. But as soon as we have that mindset, then we're going to do something for a while, we get some results, and then we're going to stop doing that something and we're going to go back to doing the same thing that created the problem in the first place. And that's why we have hundreds of millions of people who are yo-yo dieting, because they're doing something for a while. Get over that idea. What we have to do is adopt a lifestyle, adopt some principles around which we can create a lifestyle for the rest of our lives. But even if you do it for the rest of your life, it doesn't mean you can't change some of the variables around. So you can change the fasting periods, you could do cleanses for certain periods of time. That's still within the principles, but the main principles you understand have to be for a lifetime. Now, if we want to lose belly fat, the first thing we have to understand is, how did it get there in the first place? Where did it come from? And some people are immediately going to say that the belly fat came from too many calories, but we're going to cover this in some detail because a calorie is not a calorie is not a calorie. It starts with high blood sugar, high blood glucose, because that triggers high insulin levels. And insulin does many things in the body, but one thing it causes indirectly is fat storage. The insulin acts on the glucose gets into the cell. We can use some of it right now, but most of it we're going to store for later. And most of that storage is going to be as fat. But if we maintain that insulin high because we keep eating frequent meals with high carbohydrate, now that high insulin prevents us from using that fat storage. So even though we store all that energy, we can't get to it as long as we maintain high insulin. One more thing happens, and this is low blood sugar, right? So if we eat high glucose, high carbs frequently, we teach the body to depend on that, but we also sort of confuse the body over time. And the body learns to make a bunch of insulin, and oftentimes that's going to overshoot. And it's going to push, if we have high blood sugar, it's going to rebound and cause low blood sugar. That's a glucose roller coaster. That is why a lot of people, even with insulin resistance, are going to have hypoglycemia. So even though they may have high blood sugar according to an A1C test, in between, they're actually hypoglycemic. And this is extra bad when you can't get to the fat storage because of high insulin. So you have all this energy stored, you need some energy because of your low blood sugar, but you can't get to it because of that high insulin. And now what the body does, it says, I gotta have some energy, let's create some cravings. And a craving is an urgent need to bring your blood sugar up. And this is why they put a vending machine and a soda machine on every corner, in every office, in every business, in every school, so that we can get a quick blood sugar fix. We can get some comfort foods. And now, of course, that creates high blood sugar. So we're sort of stuck in a loop, and that makes it very, very difficult to get out of this loop because we're constantly hungry, we have high blood sugar, but the high insulin keeps us from ever using that fat that we have in storage. So insulin is the first and most important thing we have to understand. The second one is that low blood glucose creates a second hormone. It triggers the body's cortisol. And cortisol is a messenger that tells the body, make more blood sugar. All right, so there are two ways you can do this. You can eat it by cravings, or your body can generate it from glycogen or from protein. But you can't really get it from the fat still. And so this cortisol raises blood sugar, and now you have a second loop where you get stuck. And this is why it's so difficult to just eat less, because you're not really breaking this pattern. And for a lot of people, there's one more factor called stress. Because what does stress do? Stress is a state where your body says, I need more energy because there's a threat. There's something I gotta get done. I'm having heightened demand, so we have to make more energy. So no matter what your glucose levels are, when you're stressed, your body still wants more because that's fast energy. So stress is also going to create cravings, and stress is going to raise cortisol. And if we want to lose belly fat for good, we have to be absolutely clear on what triggers insulin. And we already said that it's triggered by blood sugar, but then obviously the next step is the foods that can become blood sugar. And carbohydrate is the obvious candidate, but there's more to it. First of all, there's enormous confusion around carbohydrate. We hear all the time that white bread and processed carbs are bad, but complex carbs are good, as in white bread's bad and whole wheat bread is good. It's not true. It doesn't work like that. High sugar things like candy and soda, they're out of the question. Everyone agrees on that. But things that are starchy, like white bread or whole wheat, there's still 80% starch. They break down the same way. The fact that one has a smidgen of fiber makes no difference. They break down into glucose within minutes, and they have a huge impact on blood sugar and insulin. So any concentrated form of carbohydrate and starch is a bad thing if you're trying to reduce insulin and lose weight. So if we compare the insulin response between different foods, then high sugar and high starch, we'd put around 100. Okay, there's some variation in that group, but just to give an idea, high starch carbohydrates and high sugars, they're like 100. How does that compare to other foods? Well, low sugar and low starch, like berries and leafy greens and cauliflower and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and asparagus, they're still, all the energy that they have pretty much is carbohydrate, but there's so little of it. It's mostly water. So in comparison, a non-starch or low-starch carbohydrate would only produce a fraction as much insulin. And that's why you can still eat those things even though they're all carbohydrate, because it's mostly water. And if you're counting carbs, then these are the kind of carbs you count. But there are other things that can turn into blood glucose. So the next one is protein. So the purpose of protein is to become body tissue, to become enzymes and hormones and things the body has to make from protein. But not all protein becomes tissue. Some of it gets turned into energy, into glucose. The excess gets turned into glucose. So if the protein you eat is like egg or meat, then a fairly high percentage gets turned into tissue because the composition matches the composition of your body pretty closely. But if you eat a plant protein or a processed protein or whey or hemp or something like that in a protein powder, much, much less of that protein gets turned into tissue, which means more of it gets turned into glucose. So protein can become glucose, and then it will affect insulin. So on the low end, it might be like something like this, which is more than the non-starchy carbohydrate. And if it's on the high end, it would be a little bit more still. But we have to understand that even though it turns into protein, it's not in the same way that this does. It's not nearly as much, and it is much, much slower than carbohydrates. So it has a lesser and a slower impact, which is very favorable. And even fat can become glucose. The fat itself can't, but the way we package fat in the body is called triglyceride. 3 fatty acids on a glycerol molecule, and this glycerol is about 5% of the weight, so a few percent of the calories in fat can actually become glucose. But again, it's much, much less, and it's vastly slower than either protein or carbohydrate. So if we have a relative relationship in how much insulin is produced, this is pretty much what it looks like. And why do we need to know about cortisol? Why is that important? Because cortisol is a hormone that's produced in response to stress. And when you're stressed, your body puts a brake on the healing and inflammation. So they use that principle by giving you a medication that is the same molecule but man-made of cortisol. And if they give you a shot, like in a joint somewhere, they're going to call that cortisone shot. And if they give you a pill for systemic effect, it's going to be something like prednisone. And there's many different names to these. They're called steroids, and there are many different brand names. But what they all have in common is that they are glucocorticoids. And the only thing you need to know there is that it affects glucose. And if there's any doubt as to how important, how profound this can be, then just ask anyone who has been put on prednisone, and they will tell you in many, many cases, the side effects are weight gain, high blood sugar, increased thirst in some extreme cases, some more severe cases, and also frequent urination. And if you notice, if you watch some of my videos, or if you're a diabetic, you know that that's another word for diabetes. High blood sugar, increased thirst, frequent urination is diabetes. So this is something that contributes very, very strongly to weight gain and diabetes. So the best diet/lifestyle is simply the one that you can stick with, right? So we're not trying to promote a special brand or a special diet. We just want to understand how do they work. And if you're in favor of calorie restriction, then you're probably going to get hungry. So if you lose weight and you want to be, if you're okay with being hungry for the rest of your life, if that works for you, then that might be the diet for you. If you're okay with deprivation, then that might be an okay diet for you. And if you want to do it like the people on The Biggest Loser and exercise 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day and they lose enormous amounts of weight, if you are comfortable with keeping that up for the rest of your life, then that might be the model for you. But if you're like most of us, then we want to start applying these principles in an intelligent way. Then what is it going to take for diet success? And when I say diet, I mean the principles governing your food choices, the proper food for humans. Well, if you want to lose weight, first you have to create a calorie deficit. That's a given. But it's not enough, because if that's all you do, it will be short-term, there'll be rebounds, you can't keep it up, and so forth. That's why 98% of diets fail. In addition to that, we have to solve the hunger deprivation problem. We have to create a plan that will keep us satisfied, where we're full when we eat and not so hungry between meals. We have to solve the problem of unstable blood glucose. because if it keeps being high and low, every time it's high, you have insulin being high, you can't burn fat. Every time it's low, you're going to get cravings and you get hunger and deprivation. You have to get you to where you have metabolic flexibility, that your body can live off, can create energy flexibly from whatever you give it. And it can burn the fat when you don't feed it for a little bit, and when you feed it, it knows what to do with it. Also have to solve the problem of insulin resistance, because when we have insulin resistance, we can't burn fat. That insulin has to come down before the fat off the body is burned. And we also have to create a long-term lowered insulin resistance. We have to become more insulin sensitive to change our set point, because if we can't change the set point, then we will have a rebound no matter how few calories you eat. And most importantly, it has to be satisfying and so easy that you won't go back. You can't go back, because if you do, then you're going to create the problem all over again. So let's talk through some of these variables and the different popular diets. So when I say USDA, I'm talking about the standard version, standard recommendations that count your calories, eat low fat because fat is high in calories, avoid saturated fat, eat skimmed milk, eat lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of grain, lots of bread, and all the other things that haven't worked. So initially you create a calorie deficit, but how about hunger and cravings? Well, you're going to have plenty of them. And what about stabilizing blood sugar? No, it won't do that, because you eat low fat and high carb and frequent meals, so your blood sugar is going to keep being all over the place. Because of that, you're going to create some reduction in insulin resistance just because you eat less, but because of the unstable blood sugar, you're not going to solve your insulin resistance problem. You're not going to be consistent enough. You're not going to be able to do it long enough to truly change that insulin resistance. And therefore, you're also not going to change your set point. And this is why almost every time this becomes a yo-yo diet, because the set point makes you rebound. And can you create long-term health? Maybe. If you eat all of the whole foods, even if they're low fat, you can probably create pretty good health, but can you stick to it? Probably not. Next we have low carb, high fat, which if you take the carbs very low, then you get into ketosis. Your diet is ketogenic. And again, you can create a calorie deficit. Now the difference is you also address your blood sugar, your hunger and cravings, and your insulin resistance very profoundly. It's going to be very powerful in addressing all of these. And because of that, it's much easier to create and to maintain that calorie deficit. And what about the set point? Well, I put a question mark here because it depends on you. For a lot of people, doing low carb, high fat / keto is going to be enough. The majority of people will lose weight permanently and find it easy to maintain that. But if your body is really stubborn, what tends to happen is you lose some weight and then you hit a plateau. So for some people, that set point does not change enough. Will this create long-term health? Depends on the quality of the foods you eat. So you can eat low carb, high fat, and you can eat food with a bunch of chemicals, you can eat processed foods, you can eat margarine, and it will work for these 4 things. But if you put a bunch of chemicals and foreign stuff and frankenfood in your body, then that's not going to create long-term health. You might lose the weight and you get skinny, but skinny people get headaches and cancer and autoimmune disease, and they suffer from a bunch of other things. So you want to look for the bigger picture and also look at the quality so you can create long-term health. Next is intermittent fasting, and this is one of the easiest ways to create a calorie deficit and get good results because you eat fewer meals, you go longer between meals, it's much easier to eat less. You train your body to expect fewer meals. Now the rest of them, as far as handling cravings and blood sugar and insulin resistance and set point, it's going to depend on the person and it's going to depend on the type of foods you eat. A lot of people can still keep eating pizza and ice cream and not have cravings, but for some people, you're going to have cravings unless you also combine it with foods that are low insulin stimulating. Same thing with stable blood sugar. Some people are going to be hyper and hypoglycemic unless they teach their body with good foods, with low carb foods, whereas others can actually become metabolically flexible, still eating pizza and ice cream. Same thing with insulin resistance, same thing with set point. It's going to depend on the person. If you eat more carbs, it can still work, but you're going to have more insulin swings, so it's going to be adequate for some people and not for others. Same thing with long-term health. It's going to depend on the quality of the food. Skinny people get sick too. And what about paleo? Paleo is where you eat like people ate before agriculture, before civilization. So now you cut out the dairy, you cut out the grain, you cut out sugar and processed foods. And if you're a more strict version, you also cut out beans and various forms of legumes. And this is going to give you a huge advantage over the standard USDA because you're going to naturally eat lower carb, not necessarily super low carb, but you're going to eat low carb, you're going to stabilize blood sugar, you're going to improve all of these, but depending on how sensitive you are, it may or may not be enough. Okay? If you have stubborn metabolism, you may have to go lower carbs than that allows for. Paleo can be a keto diet, so then you would get more and more of those benefits. Same thing with the Mediterranean diet. What does Mediterranean really mean? It's just more of the type of foods they eat around the Mediterranean, but that's a huge variety. So for most people, that just means that they eat more whole foods and less processed foods. So it's kind of like the paleo, but they do allow some bread, and the biggest difference is that they eat more olive oil. So in that sense, it's a higher fat diet than the USDA, and you're getting it from a whole food source because the olive oil that they're eating is still a relatively stable and healthy fat source. So how does it help with all these other factors? Well, it's exactly like the paleo. It depends on what you do with it. If you understand what we said about insulin and cortisol, then you can adapt it. You can make it low carb or you can make it high carb. But the advantage is it has more whole foods and it has some good healthy fats in there. Then how can we check off all of these boxes? Well, now we go to what I call ideal or clean keto. We eat low carb, high fat to the degree that we need, as low as it takes to correct the problem in our case. And then we also understand that margarine is not a good food, chemicals are not good, processed high-fat, low-carb foods are still not great food. And now we start addressing obviously the same four as previously, but we also getting some long-term health. What about set point? Well, for an even larger number, we're talking probably 95% of people are now going to have success in permanent weight loss. They're going to lose weight, they might have a short plateau, but then they'll keep losing again. But if you're among the most stubborn, then you'll hit that, you lose a little weight, then you hit that plateau. And just getting in ketosis is not enough. What those people have to do, if you're among the most stubborn, now you also have to add intermittent fasting, and now we get to check all the boxes. How much intermittent fasting depends on how stubborn your plateau is. If you do 16 or 18 or 20 hours and it works, great. If not, you got to do 24 or 36 or 48. And then once you have addressed all of these, now you can have permanent weight loss. And then you'll have some flexibility to vary the amount of fasting period and the amount of carbohydrates and so forth. But you understand what governs these principles. You can eat till you're full and you can have a satisfying lifestyle for the rest of your life. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.